a verse from the Gita that I wanted to unpack and explore with you. What I think we'll do is, I think we'll look at the verse. I'm going to give you guys a real good literal translation of the verse. And then once we've got that, we'll all have that. And then we'll start to discuss its meaning. You know, when you're trying to understand a text, the set of rules that are used to understand texts, and the branch of I guess science/philosophy that deals with how to understand a book. It's called hermeneutics. And we all have, maybe not formal, but we all have just naturally some training in hermeneutics. A later statement, generally speaking, supersedes a prior statement. So if Ross, who in addition to harassing the elderly, as a part-time gig, is a financial manager, invests people's money. What do you call yourself? Financial advisor. Essentially, he invests people's money. How big is what kind of money you invest in these days? 60 million. You've grown. Congratulations, man. That's wonderful. And you make a percentage of that. So that increase from 40 to 60 that's a big win for you and for your clients. He's good at what he does. He just one-man shop. He has a couple people work for him, but it's his thing, his business. If Ross was to say, I think X stock was a good investment, whatever, Apple, whatever, and then you were going to invest, and then you said, take KD, yeah, Ross said it was a good investment, and then KD, that's KD, says, no, I talked to Ross this morning, and he said it's a terrible investment, and it's tanked. Stock tanked. It's on its way down. The fact that he told me personally that it was a good investment, if I trust KD, and he says, no, I talked to him just 10 minutes ago. You talked to him a week ago. I just talked to him 10 minutes ago. He said it was a terrible investment. Naturally, that statement by you is superseded by your more recent statement. That's a principle of hermeneutics. When you're reading a text and you encounter differing statements, one immediate thing people do is they look at the later statement and then it supersedes the former statement. You follow? Additionally, if something is repeated over and over again and is, developed systematically, and then there's just a random statement that doesn't really fit, that oftentimes gets chalked up to a misunderstanding, or you maybe caught the person in a bad moment, and so you've got where's Narayan? Oh, there he is. There's Narayan. See Narayan? The white Anglo-Saxon Protestant Trump-supporting Texan. Raise your hand, Narayan. That's Narayan. Whitest dude in the room. I mean, maybe you're whiter than he is, Eric. It's like you're like red. You're like pure Irish, right? Yeah. Anyway, so Narayan who was born on Hare Krishna, who is very, very fair-skinned. His last name is Peñate, and he's actually Salvadoran, the same as you. And so Narayan is married to a Nandini, who's Mexican from Mexico. He's Salvadoran himself. And he's genuinely an anti-racist, good guy. And so his life is an example of that. And he's also a person of color. Even though he doesn't look like it, he's actually a person of color. He married a person of color, and people who know him know that he's anti-racist. If Narayan someday, for some reason, or even Anandini, for some reason, they made a statement which might seem kind of racist, let's say against Mexican people, that they get a pass because they're Latinx themselves, so they automatically get a pass. It's like when black people use the N-word, they get a pass. So if Mexican people want to use some colorful language for their people, they're allowed to do that. That's their right. They definitely don't need a Karen, virtue signaling their way into correcting them. But beyond that, if we just look at their lives, and you came over, how old were you?
A few months.
And you were illegal, right?
Yeah.
You had to play that whole game. So that whole thing, her whole tribe came over illegally and was scared, could be deported. It was a whole thing for decades, getting legal in this country. And her whole family is her dad looked like he's from the Sinaloan cartel. When they take Christmas photos, he's wearing full cowboy boots in front of his truck, and his truck is custom painted with a painting of him on the truck. So there's a truck, and then the truck, he's standing next to the truck in the painting on the side of his truck. You follow? And a full cowboy hat, and a big old belt buckle, and you're just are you kidding me? Am I joking? No. And so, if she made a statement which was slightly off color, seemed like it might be slightly inappropriate, there's just a number of other factors that are there in terms of her own ethnic background, her own stance on issues, her activism in college, the way she lives her life, who she married, the community she's involved in. And those things would cancel out if she said something which was slightly edgy because she's so clearly on the correct side of the fence. Do you guys follow that?
Yes.
That's also, it's a way of analyzing people and what they're doing and what they're saying. And we all do this automatically. We have the ability, really quick, just like we have the ability to recognize danger. Supersonic speed, we recognize danger. Your wife comes home, you're asleep, you're sleeping like a log, and then she's making all kinds of ruckus, cooking, cleaning, whatever, and you do not wake up. But then your kid's room, that you hear the doorknob turns, you hear the door crack open in your kid's room, and all of a sudden you wake up. Because you're processing what's danger and what's normal. And you sleep through the normal stuff, and the dangerous stuff immediately gets a reaction. We're built with those kind of filters, and we're trained to have filters in terms of communicating with other people and understanding what they're saying, and a book is a form of communication. And so these rules of hermeneutics, they carry over. And, I saw a comedian yesterday who was telling a biblical story as part of his comedy routine, which I thought it was hilarious. And so he told the story how Jesus went to Jerusalem and he wanted to eat something because he was hungry, he was a bit famished. So he went and he saw a fig tree in Jerusalem. He went over to the fig tree, he wanted to get a fig, but then the figs were out of season, so there were no figs on the fig tree because it was out of season. I mean, Jesus kind of should have known that, right? Living in Galilee, figs are only bearing fruit a certain amount of months per year, and he should kind of have figured that out just growing up, in that neighborhood. You should have figured that out, right? Right? It's kind of ridiculous. Anyway, he shows up at the fig tree and he gets upset that there's no figs on the tree, and he curses the fig tree. You will never produce figs. You are useless. You will die having never given benefit to anyone. And then he leaves. He comes back the next day and the fig tree's died. And his disciples say, just see, Jesus, the fig tree has died. He said, God, it's like God is great. So he says, have faith in God. And it's like, what kind of a jerk is Jesus? He's like cursing a fig tree because it doesn't produce figs out of season for him. And then when the fig tree dies because of his curse, he's like, you deserved it, fool. That's what you get, messing with me. Right? And the guy, the comedian, just read it straight. And it was like people were busting a gut. It was so hilarious. But then I watched a scholar deal with it. He's like, yeah, this isn't Mark. And it's one of Mark's sandwich narratives where the real story takes place in between the two slices of bread of the other story. And so there's 5 verses in the middle of the story that the comedian neglected to read. And those are the 5 verses where Jesus went into the temple in Jerusalem where they were selling doves so people could sacrifice the doves and kill animals because not everybody could afford, a lamb. And so they would sacrifice a dove. They'd buy a dove and they'd sacrifice at the temple. And they also have money changers in there. If you want to give like a, you get it, they do this in India too. You go to a temple and you give, a rupee, and then they give you 10, they give you 9, 10 paisa coins. They make 10 cents off the deal, and then they give you 9. That way you can give small donations. So they were doing that. They had money changers in the temple courtyard so that people could exchange money. And Jesus said, you turn my home into a den of thieves. That story took place in the middle of the beginning, like the first day and the second day. And so what was really being said, because the fig tree is located just across from the temple in Jerusalem, what was really being communicated by Mark after the fall of the Jerusalem temple, when Rome sacked Jerusalem, I think it was 70 AD, and destroyed the temple, which has never recovered. And then the whole Pharisee form of worship at the great temple, where Judaism was centered in Israel, in Jerusalem, at that temple, was over, and they actually never got it back. And now it's a mosque. And even though Israel took over Israel, and they took over Jerusalem, they left the mosque as it is, because it's also a holy place for Muslims. And that's their third most important holy place. Mecca, Medina, and then Jerusalem. And because the Archangel Gabriel came one night and took Muhammad, and they flew to Jerusalem and revealed some truths there. And so it's a sacred place, a pilgrimage for them. And they when they took it over, during the kind of crusade period, they built a mosque there. And that mosque still stands, even though Israel is run by Jewish people primarily, and the IDF runs Jerusalem, Greater Jerusalem. They leave the mosque alone, even though it's their temple from thousands of years ago, because it would be insane. The entire world of Islam would rise up against them instantaneously. It would be. How do we know that? Because the IDF is incredibly aggressive, and so they're not doing it. Given how aggressive a stance they take and how violent they can be and how militant and nationalistic they can be, the fact that they're avoiding doing this, it speaks volumes. So anyway, Mark sandwiched in between the two stories, Jesus going to the temple and saying, "You've turned my home into a den of thieves." And so what's really being said is the fig tree now becomes figurative. And Jesus is saying the fig tree will no longer produce fruit, meaning that the temple will no longer be the heart of Judaism. And the fact that had already happened by the time Mark was written. You follow? So Jesus was prophesizing something which already happened by the time Mark was written. Are you guys following this? It's not particularly complicated. It's a little, it's like there's a few layers to it. And so it's a sandwich narrative, which Mark likes to do, where he'll tell you a story which is kind of figuratively related to the actual story, which is nestled in the middle, and he'll give you the back end of this figurative story that's meant to augment, and you, as the reader, are supposed to understand what's going on. And so what he's really saying is, and when he says have faith in God, it's not like have faith in God, God is great, just see my power. It's more have faith in God that our mission, Judaism, will still exist, even though it's not centered there. Have faith in God, it'll all be okay. You get it? Even though what we've known will cease to be, will be okay. And in fact, that gave rise to rabbinic Judaism. And it was a switch. And Judaism was able to survive all around the world with diaspora communities that still kept the rituals alive and the tradition alive, even though they weren't all centered around temple worship. So now Jesus is he's just speaking in figurative language to augment and concretize the point he's trying to make. Do you guys follow that? That's more sophisticated hermeneutics. You have to be familiar with the Bible and biblical literature and literature that was written a couple thousand years ago and the way authors from that time spoke. There's, in Hinduism, Max Mueller is a very famous Indologist from Germany. He coined a term called kathenotheism. There's henotheism, which is where you worship one god at a time, and then there's kathenotheism, where you worship one god at a time, or henotheism is where there's many gods, but your tribe worships one, and then kathenotheism is you worship one god at a time, but when you worship them, you make it sound like they're the supreme deity. And what happened was, Max Mueller read Sanskrit literature, and when Sanskrit literature is glorifying a demigod, they glorify them in hyperbolic terms, because that's the culture. Just like in India, if you meet somebody from India and they're talking about their family, they're like, oh, this is my best friend. Then you'll meet somebody else, hey, this is my best friend. And you're like, pretty soon you're like, well, which one's your best friend? And they've introduced you like 6 people. I do this. I'm like, you're my best friend, and I've got a couple of dozen best friends. And so it's like more like a list, and it means you're in my inner circle. Right? This is very common. Or you'll say, that's my cousin brother. And then you're like, your actual, because you seem to have a lot of cousins. Every time we meet somebody, they seem to be your cousin brother. Are they actually your cousin? Are they your auntie? And I'm like, no, they're from my neighborhood, in my village. Isn't this common? And if you're from India, you just know that. And you don't even bat an eyelash. They're like, this is my best friend. You are my best friend. You are my only friend. And then, this is my cousin brother. She is my auntie. You get it. You understand what's going on. It's a village relationship. And then if they're actually introducing you to their actual brother, they'll be like, this is my real brother. This is my blood brother. We have the same mother. Like, they'll tell you, they'll make it clear that, because everybody's their brother. So then when you actually meet their real brother, they have to go 3 or 4 more layers deep so you'll know what's going on. You get it? Or when they ask you to eat something, they'll be like, hey, please have something to eat. Do you want some more rice? And then the proper thing is you say, no, I'm okay. Because what you're really saying is, I'm not a glutton and I don't know if you have enough. Then they go, no, please eat more. And what they're saying there is they're saying, no, we have enough. It's cool. You want some more? And you go, no, I don't want any more. I'm absolutely fine. You're saying, I know you have to offer me twice, but I'm saying twice no to make it easy on you. And then, it's like the same, like you talk to any person, I was like, hello. You say it back and forth like 8 times before you finally are like, okay, we're both on the phone, we can both hear each other. And then the conversation. So these are cultural things. They're cultural things. And if you go to Thailand, they have a bunch of cultural things there too. And amazingly, in the U.S., we have some things too. They're generally kind of rough and tumble and low class and kind of like like some sort of like culturally accepted narcissism, like overt aggression. And we seem to people in other parts of the world with old world culture to just practically be like barbarians. But when Max Mueller read Vedic texts, which I get it, the Vedic text, whoever you're glorifying, you glorify with hyperbolic terms because that's just the culture. He got so bewildered, he coined a new term, kathenotheism, and introduced it into English because he'd never encountered in the study of religion something like this. You follow? He discovered monolatry, where there might be other gods, like the Baals and Ishtars of the Jewish text, but then, Adonai would say, I'm a jealous God, and thou shalt have no other gods before me. And it was understood that there was only one deity that you worshipped or venerated. And he discovered polytheism, where nobody was really supreme, but he never encountered a tradition which had multiple deities and then glorified them all, but still would say this one is supreme. It kind of boggled his mind. He couldn't work his way through it, and so he coined a new term. Of course, you talk to just a native pundit, and they're like, you're an idiot, you have no idea what you're talking about, here's what's really going on, because he doesn't understand how to unpack the text. Or like the comedian didn't understand how to unpack the biblical text. And so when you look at hermeneutics, some of it's intuitive. The later statement supersedes the former statement. The thing that you're well known for, if there's an off moment where you say something a little off color, that's forgivable because you're known for this, and that's got to be your stance. But then some of it gets a little more complicated, like sandwich narratives, like hyperbole. And you have to be trained in order to recognize it. You follow? But it's important to do that because otherwise you're just an idiot who has no idea what to make of what you're reading. But the way the text is written sets parameters for how it can be correctly interpreted. And sometimes there's multiple interpretations which are available to you. Sometimes there's multiple ways you can interpret something. And they're reasonable. And they're logical and reasonable, consistent with the way that the text was written and what the intended purpose of the author was. But without any hermeneutics, without any grammar, without any vocabulary, there's no use in even reading the text because you can't make any sense of it. So even syntax and grammar and context, the things around the text, and the cultural milieu the text came out of, and the language of that time, all these things are incredibly valuable tools. And if you understand them a little bit, then when you look at the text, you can begin to understand it, not just abusing it, where you co-opt it, and it's cultural appropriation. And you take a text from an ancient culture and then just say whatever you want to say based on the text, even though what you're saying has nothing to do with text. And you would have been better off just saying your own piece, but not trying to authenticate what you're saying by stealing from another tradition. You follow? Not that. You can actually get what they're saying, and then you kind of know what's appropriate in terms of interpreting it and how far you can take it before you've taken it too far. You guys following this? I was a little long-winded, but I wanted to sink the point for you guys. Now let's look at the text. Okay? Vyavasai, Atmaka, Budhir, Ekeha, Kuru, Nandana. Vyavasayatmaka Budhir Ekeha. Intelligence which is resolute and one-pointed. One-pointed, resolute intelligence. Vyavasaya Atmaka Budhir. Budhir is where you get Buddha from. Buddhi from means intelligence, enlightenment. Ekeha. Eka means one. Ekeha, here. Ekeha, here in this world. Eka, one-pointed intelligence, which is Vyavasaya Atmaka, which is characterized by being resolute. Vyava and so get mixed together. Vyavasai. Vyavasai Atmaka means has the quality of being resolute. So intelligence which is one-pointed and has the quality of being resolute. Vyavasaya Atmaka Budhir Ekeha Kurunandana. Bahu Shaka Hyanantascha Budhayo Avyavasayana. The intelligence which is required is one-pointed and resolute in this world. But the intelligence, buddhir avyavasayanam, of the irresolute is bahushaka, is many-branched, he anantas, and limitless, like has no end. Buddhayo avyavasayanam, the intelligence of the irresolute, is many-branched without limit. Now, if you just hear that verse right off the bat, you might think, oh, well, the many-branched and limitless intelligence sounds like a winner. Sounds more broad-minded. But later on it says that samadhana vidyate, they will not get samadhi because they are irresolute. And so a couple verses later, it explains that having irresolute intelligence is a problem because it won't get you the goal of yoga, which is samadhi. So the context, the later verse clarifies it's a negative thing. But also, vyavasai, resolution, is a good thing. One-point intelligence is a good thing in the Gita. The ability to focus is a good thing. The ability to have a purpose-driven life is a good thing. And although it sounds good, bahu shaka hyanantascha, many-branched and limitless, it's a criticism in Sanskrit. Because it means you are a jack of all trades and a master of none. It means you are not a master of anything. It means you are irresolute, that you're untrustworthy, that you can't be counted on, that you're a professional dabbler. We have language in English which communicates this. You're a professional dabbler. You're a jack of all trades and a master of none. You lack commitment. You go whichever way the wind blows. You're a fair-weather friend. We have an entire vocabulary that communicates the negative part of being commitment averse. You follow? But the literal translation doesn't communicate it. A couple verses later clarifies what's intended. And if you're familiar with Sanskrit language and classical Sanskrit language and an epic Sanskrit language is what we're dealing with here, and the language of the Gita, then you can understand it's a criticism. And you're getting a contrast. This is what you should do. This is what you shouldn't do. This is the right way to do it. This is the wrong way to do it. This will get you samadhi. This will not get you samadhi. This will get you yoga. This will not get you yoga. So again, the verse, vyavasai, resolute atmaka, comprised of resolute buddhir, intelligence, eka, one-pointed, iha, in this world. That's what you want. Bahu shaka, hyanantascha, buddhayo avyavasayana. For the irresolute people, their intelligence is just going in every direction. It's many-branched. It never fixes on anything. Because you're a commitment phobe. You never get married. You're a confirmed bachelor. You ever heard that term? That's like, who's heard the term confirmed bachelor? Raise your hand. Really? That's like super out of use. Confirmed bachelor was a euphemism for you're gay. Because like you just never got married. Like everybody got married, but you never got married. And so they kind of like, oh, you're just like, you must be dating a lot of girls and you're just a confirmed bachelor. Well, it really, like it was used euphemistically in the 30s and 40s for a gay person because they never got married. They just kind of always hung out with the boys, and like people couldn't like really wrap their heads around homosexual culture in that time. It was kind of out of like most people's like radar. They didn't even like get it that existed, and so they had this term confirmed bachelor. But when you look at the way it was used, it sounds innocuous, whatever. But it was a totally loaded term if you look at the way it was used by writers of the time. How many people knew that? Raise your hand. You knew that from me, or you knew that just from growing up? Yeah. Yeah. Benefit of being gay, right? Yeah. Yeah, like a commitment phobe. Somebody who can never commit to anything. Runs away whenever things get serious. Doesn't put skin in the game. It just dabbles. And you can't really depend on them for anything. We understand this idea. But if you just read the text, you wouldn't get it. And you might be like, I'm that guy. I'm many-branched. Limitless. That's me. That sounds epic. Sign up for that. You get it? But then when you understand the context and the language, you understand what's intended. So again, I'm just going to give you a straight English translation of the verse now. What you need for self-realization, that's what's meant by yoga and samadhi. What you need for self-realization is one-pointed, focused, resolute, determined intelligence. And for people who lack that resolution, that purpose, they still have intelligence, but without that resolute quality, their intelligence is just all over the place. And it just goes in limitless directions, and it can never focus on anything and never become accomplished at anything, and self-realization will be next to impossible. That's the verse. I want you guys to, now that you've understood the verse, now that we've unpacked the language of the verse, now that we've used a little hermeneutics to really help you locate the verse and understand what's being communicated by Krishna, I'd like some comments. What does this verse mean to you? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Do you agree with it? Do you not agree with it? Does it make sense? What thoughts does it give rise to in your mind? But it's not just what thoughts do you have in your mind, because we're taking the trouble to look at an ancient text in a proper way. And that grounds us and our discussion. And now that we're all on the same page, because we all have the ability now to know what the text says, and trust me, I'm quoting the verse to you from memory, so obviously I know what I'm doing. And I'm unpacking the words and the verbal roots that are used, all sorts of stuff for you guys, showing you corollary words you're familiar with. And so I've given you a good, grounded, literal, non-literal, in context, appropriate understanding of the text. We did both. We did literal and we did what it actually means functionally. So now you guys have the text. If you were able to listen and hear what I said, you guys now have the text. It's yours now. And I'd like some comments. Go. Yeah.
First, can you give a comment? You spoke that this is something serious. It's not something cheap that you could just dabble in. It requires a lot of concentration and dedication.
Krishna is letting you know what's expected of you if you want to sign up for this. Actually, interestingly, the previous verse says, Swalapam api asya dharmasya trayate mahatobhaya. That just by a little advancement in this dharma, alpam means like very little. Asya dharmasya, just a little of this dharma. Trayate mahatobhaya. It'll save you it'll deliver you from the greatest fears of life, the greatest difficulties of life. Just a little bit of this dharma. So Krishna actually said something very encouraging just a moment prior. He said, this dharma I'm teaching, this yoga I'm teaching, he's teaching something called Buddhi Yoga here, which means an enlightened lifestyle. And he says, just a little bit of this dharma will deliver you from great difficulty. And then this verse is given on the back end of that, and there's a counter. So it's like you can dip your toe, it's okay, and if you really want to get good at this, it's going to take a lot. So there's a balance there. But for sure, this verse is a counterbalance to the encouraging verse in the last one. This verse becomes a sobering verse. Did you guys follow that? Did you follow You follow that? It was encouraging initially, and then he said something heavy, right? Which is cool. I mean, Krishna is a sophisticated communicator. So he's able to do that. Here's what you should do, here's what you shouldn't do. Let me give you a little encouragement, but not too much you think it's cheap. So your read of the verse, looking at the surrounding verses, it fits like a hand in a glove. That's great. Super conservative, minimal, but I didn't say anything remotely resembling that. You came up with that all on your own, and you're in the current of the text. Because that's 100% where the text is going, as evidenced by the fact that Krishna was bouncing back from having said something encouraging in the previous verse. You could have easily said, oh, this is very encouraging. I'm very encouraged. Oh, I'm very sobered up. It's like he's patting your back, he's giving you a smack. Right? It's like the carrot and the stick. Which is a great way to communicate. It's good behavioral therapy. You punish bad behavior. I'm not saying you should actually do that, but you get rid of the bad behavior and you augment the good behavior. You do both. You kind of sober people up so they know it's serious, and at the same time you have a little bit of levity and a little bit of encouragement. So it's not just all tough all the time. Okay, more. Yes?
I'm hearing these two distinct people. One who has their emotions everywhere, one who's super resolute. And I'm wondering what the bridge is, or if there's a way to become resolute from having many different interests.
That's a great question, natural question. I'm just going to, for the sake of speed, I'm going to be a little aggressive in my answer because I know that you're cool with that. You forever have the ability to choose what you want to focus on and what you want to commit to. There is nothing else which is responsible for that. There are things in life that are 100% in your wheelhouse and are your responsibility, and that's one of them. And so there is a bridge. You can choose to stop being irresolute and a dabbler who doesn't commit to anything, and you can choose to become the kind of person who can make serious commitments when appropriate in serious situations. And that is 100% your choice. Instead of needing an environmental change where the circumstances change, this is the kind of thing where you need to just flip the switch in your own heart and make that determination. That doesn't mean I believe in what you're doing. You might have to convince me that what you're doing is worth committing to. But the ability to commit, that is you. You're always bringing that. What you choose to focus on, that's always your responsibility. You're an adult. And the fact that Krishna is giving this instruction means I want this one and not this one. I'm telling you this one's bad, so you will go for this one because I know that you have the free will. The very fact that the text exists for someone to read is an acknowledgement of your free will and your ability to choose what you want to do. So a lot of times we can look for environmental factors that can be changed, ways in which we can sculpt things, and certainly that could happen, but it's all, you're the genesis of all of that. Because it's up to you what you want to focus on. And so the verse is appropriate in that it doesn't tell you, and if you get this blessing or that blessing or this or that. It's really just if you choose to do this, you can become a more focused person. That was a great question. It was a great question. Good. More. Yeah.
What I really like about this verse is Krishna gives an explanation and then he gives an instruction, where he explains that there's so many distractions out there, and you can be intelligent in different areas, but true intelligence is spiritual intelligence.
Let me respond to that. Krishna does sometimes give instructions in the Gita, and when you give instructions in the Sanskrit language, you will use what's called the imperative case in a verb. Like Krishna says, for instance, Bhava mad bhakta, be my devotee, be my bhakta. Bhava it means to be, but it's in the imperative case. It's literally the equivalent of saying, be my devotee. You follow? There's also the optative case, you could be, should be my devotee. There's a blessing, may you be a devotee. Kalyanastu, you guys heard that one? What is it? Sarva Sukhino Bhavatu. What is it? You know that? Sukhino Bhavantu. Let everyone be happy. That's a blessing in Sanskrit. kalyanastu, sukhino astu, sukhino bhavatu. It's all, let this be the case. Let this blessing occur. So in Sanskrit, you change verbs, and those verbs communicate whether something is an instruction or not. There is nothing instructive in this verse. It's intended to be instructive, but it's actually descriptive. There are two types of people in this world. One gets samadhi, the other one doesn't. Now, I could say, if you pull that trigger, you will go to jail. Is that an instruction? No, I'm simply saying here will be the result of what you do. I'm not telling you what to do. Krishna very occasionally in the Gita will give an instruction. He doesn't do it here. These verses are descriptive rather than prescriptive, but in the Sanskrit language, you can give descriptive verses which are to some extent prescriptive, and that's how it's meant to be read. But Krishna's not actually giving an instruction, which would then be occasioned by Krishna using the imperative case in the verbs, which he doesn't do. Did you guys follow that? So you're right, but I'm also just adding something. How deep you can go with understanding what's being stated. And you have this ability in English. You know, there's two types of people in this world. The people who are resolute, the people who are irresolute. That's not an instruction. Be resolute. That's an instruction. You must be resolute. That's an instruction. One should be resolute. That's a recommendation. You get it? See the difference? You follow that? But you're right, we are encouraged. The verse is intended to encourage you to be this guy and not that guy. For sure. Yes. You got your hand up?
This verse naturally leaves me thinking of the importance of being focused on the right thing or person. And I think about how in my life, certainly having multiple things I'm trying to pay attention to doesn't work, but also if I have one focus on the wrong thing, it's also problematic.
Yeah. Being resolutely focused on the wrong thing can be a disaster. So it's not just that you have to cultivate the ability to be resolutely focused. You also have to cultivate the ability to choose what you want to give your time and attention to. Like they want to get rid of weightlifting in the Olympics and boxing and replace it with rock climbing, skateboarding, and surfing. Depending on what side of the fence you're on, that's either a good thing or a bad thing. I'm on the bad thing side of the fence. I'm like, what is wrong with you people? It's literally the origin of the Olympics. You get traded in for skateboarding and surfing? Come on, man. Anyway, so yeah, you could focus on getting really good at playing a card game like Tiddlywinks, which just, the name of the card game is so stupid that no one should play it. I don't even know what the game is. I just know the word Tiddlywinks. I know it's some kind of card game. Who knows what the game Tiddlywinks is? Nobody knows, right? If you know, that's a bad sign if you know what this game is. But there is a game. It's called Tiddlywinks, and no one should spend their life getting really good at it. Like somebody's like, I'm a professional jacks player. I'm like, what an awful use of your athletic ability, right? Right? It's like, come on.
I don't think anybody here knows what jacks are.
You know what jacks are? Like little small versions of like a torture device. Like the spikes they put in front of cars, and you bounce a ball, and you have to pick them up when you bounce the ball. Yeah, it's like that's how lame the game is. It went out of style, right?
It was fun for me when I was a kid.
Yeah, like in the 70s and 80s, right? But it's like it didn't even make it. Most stuff makes it. They finally got rid of fruit stripe gum. You guys know what that is? They just got rid of it. You guys know what fruit stripe gum is? I love that stuff growing up. I haven't had it in like 40 years, but man, I loved me some fruit stripe gum as a kid. I just read in the news today, they gotten rid of fruit stripe gum. I'm sure it's not vegan. I don't chew gum anyway. I think gum is gross. My kids all chew it. I think they're gross. But I certainly ate, because that's what you used to do with gum. You'd chew it and then swallow it. It was like a weird thing. You know what I mean? Like bubble gum. You know what I mean? It's like you blow some bubbles and chew it, and like for some reason you swallow it at a certain point. What I just do? That fruit stripe gum was probably like getting a candy bar or something like that. That stuff was so yummy and so chock full of flavor. You're almost just like just eating them, just not even like pretending to chew them. I'm sure that's gelatin or some other nonsense in it. I haven't even tried to eat it, but I thought for a moment I should find out if it's vegan and then go on Amazon and get me a couple of packs because it's gone forever. You guys know the gum? Came in like it was a zebra, and they had like a little temporary tattoo that would come in the thing as well. And it was either like rainbow colored, super LGBTQ plus friendly, the most friendly gum on the planet. Do you guys all know it? I love that gum. I probably stopped eating it when I was like 6 because it's like if you're over 6 and you're eating that gum, people started to think maybe you should be put back in school or something like that. I don't know how I got into that. It was so random. How did I get there?
You shouldn't be focused on.
The wrong things. Yeah, exactly. Boom. Case in point. Case in point. Or fruit stripe gum for that. I wrote a whole paper on it. Yeah, I mean obviously you need to find the right thing to focus on, and that's why I said, the fact that I accept I should be resolute and should have that ability and should be able to turn that on doesn't mean you convinced me that I should turn that on in relation to what you're doing. That's another conversation, but at least I'm ready to bring that when I meet the right thing. Good, yeah.
I think Krishna talks about all the different philosophies that people use, and they also talk about different rituals that people use, and ways that they try to approach divinity or try to get things in this world, and then creates a hierarchy of worshiping them with devotion is the highest. And I think this is kind of just setting the stage for that.
Interestingly, the next verse says, Pushpam Vachalam, the flowery words of the Vedas. Bhogaishwarya Prasaktanam, which are for people who are too attached to enjoyment. Samadhana Vidyate, they won't get samadhi. And that Vedas, Triguna Vishaya Veda, that the Vedas are mainly about these rituals in the 3 gunas. Nishtragunya Bhavarjuna, be free from the 3 gunas, which means be free from the Vedas, because whatever water is contained within a small well, if you have an overflowing lake, ocean of water, that it can satisfy all the purposes of a small well. Similarly, the self-realized soul understands all the value of the Vedas and so much more. And so this section of the Gita is Krishna making critical statements about the overly ritualistic culture of the Vedas. And so your intuition is exactly where the verse goes. How cool is that? So yeah, this does set up a critique of ritualism and this idea of a deep spirituality as being where we should be focused. Excellent. Leela. Excellent. I'm going to comment on that in a second because it gets to what I saw in the verse. But I'm going to save it. Mudden, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I really appreciated in this verse too the emphasis on that determination, and it seemed like what you focus on really affects the quality of your whole life or how you build it. So
What you focus on and whether or not you focus. They're both critical features. What you focus on and whether or not you cultivate the capacity for focus. They're both critical. The ability to focus is what's stated in the text, and it's presumed, based on the previous verses, that Krishna's already explained to you something which is worthy of your focus. And so he's already tried to establish something worthy of your focus, and now he's telling you you have to really pay attention. And so both things are important. And the subject of this verse is that you should have the capacity for focus. So a better take on the verse would be, I've realized how important it is to be able to focus in order to lead a fulfilling life. Did you follow that? Otherwise, you're seeing something which has value, and it's there in the preceding verses. But it's specifically not what's dealt with in this verse, which is the ability to focus. Did you get that? What's your response?
Thank you for clarifying that. I see that now. How I kind of missed the point on that one, even though it was in the preceding verse.
I mean, you're in the universe.
Yeah.
You're in the universe. You get it, right? There you go. Good. Okay, I think, is that enough? I was going to share my thoughts. Okay, here are my thoughts on this verse. And again, you guys should be looking, am I saying faithful to the verse? That's because you guys know the verse now. So we can look at what we're saying and be like, hey, and we can check and balance each other. That's not wrong. If we're all like, hey, we want to stay on this road, and then somebody starts to drive off the road, like, hey, turn back a little bit. Hey, zig a little bit, zag a little bit. Like, that's okay to do because we've all agreed, okay, here are the parameters we've set. I've never dated. Never been to a bar. Never dated. Been with one person in my life, my wife. My whole life I've been with one person, my wife. She's been with one person, me. So I'm not like expert at Tinder or Bumble or Hinge or OkCupid, etc., etc. I've never seen those apps. I know of them theoretically. I have some idea of which ones are more racy than the others, but just from talking to all of you knuckleheads, that's where all my knowledge just comes from you guys. And there's something exciting, I imagine, about going on a different date with a different person every day of the week. I imagine there's something exciting about that. There's some dopamine hit you get from that, and it's a bit thrilling. And there's the Coolidge effect, where the refractory period for males is minimized dramatically when a new partner is introduced, and a short-term mating strategy, whereas the same partner, the refractory period is longer. You guys know what I'm saying? I'm trying to be euphemistic about it, but whatever. I'm not going to unpack it for you guys. You either know what those words mean or you don't. I'm going to move right along. But how well can you get to know somebody? How much can you share? How vulnerable can you be? Commitment is a precursor to depth. Being able to be present for somebody, committed to somebody. I was just talking to Mudden, who was sharing with me how his mom has cancer, and they're talking. He's like, hey, we can talk every day about this, whatever you want to talk about. Like, if something's bothering you, we just talk about it over and over again every day. That's magic. That's what you want from the people that you're close to, that you love, that you count on. We're made to count on people. We're not lone wolves. And short-term strategies, they're dangerous, because those short-term liaisons, they open you up to a bunch of sexually transmitted diseases, but you also can't really build much with them. Because, when you go to sleep, they might kill you. You guys like a thug. You know thug? Thug is the Tuggies. They were a group in India that would befriend you while you were traveling, and then they would strangle you while you slept and steal your stuff. That's where the English word thug comes from. It's from the Tuggy cult. They worship Kali, and they would strangle you, and they would befriend you. So you'd be like walking down the road, and somebody would be like, hey, I'm walking down the road, I'm scared too, let's walk together. And then another guy would be like, hey, I'm walking down the road. Pretty soon there's like 3 or 4 of you, but they're all part of the same gang. And then you go to sleep, you're like, hey, you watch the fire, and then you go to sleep, and they strangle you so you can't make any noise, and they bury you, and they steal your stuff. They're referenced in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. I mean, it was a thing. The British were all about it. The British kind of wiped them out. They were all about it. But it was, when people were traveling, you're vulnerable because you're traveling. You're vulnerable. You're on the road. It's the whole highwayman, dacoit, brigand thing. When you're on the road, you're vulnerable. You got to be able to sleep and not worry about whether the person's got your back or not. And that requires more than a one-night stand. As human beings, we're designed for longer-term relationships. We're designed to have interdependent relationships. And we could do great things when we work together synergistically. What a waste of a life if you, who have the ability to focus and commit, never develop it. It's like having a sight and never opening your eyes. It's like having legs and never using them and running, squatting. It's like a wasted life. We have this magical ability to commit, to choose what to focus on, to think about things, to speak about them with other people, to communicate through recursive language that animals don't have. And this ability to make long-term commitments and place our trust in people, have people place our trust in us, and build great things through that. And to live a life without doing that, it's like living your life without using one of your arms or something like that. And then you just think about, human happiness and a purpose-driven life, and purpose is what gets people to make moves. At a certain point, monetary awards don't do it anymore. People don't stay in the same job for more and more money. It's not how it works. They stay in a job where they feel like their colleagues depend on them and they're part of something bigger than themselves. Positive psychology, which is the study of what makes people happy, amongst other things, is shown through, at this point, tens of millions of case studies that the single biggest ingredient to human happiness is to feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself. To find something bigger than yourself. And then to commit to it. That's like, everything comes from that. Even on a low level in a marriage, then children come from that. And children who grow up with both their parents and don't have, 4 times the rates of incarceration and drug use and suicide. You get married, the kids grow up with 2 parents, they're just infinitely better off, according to every study that's ever been done. You're infinitely better off because you get to really know somebody, care about somebody, and be cared for by somebody. And then out of those commitments come commitments to a larger community, or maybe those precede it, whether it's a religion or some common cause. And that's what makes people's lives worth living. That's what people are doing on the weekends. People are working hard on the weekends, doing stuff they value with people they care about. Like Wikipedia. Linux, what's it called? The free software? Linux, right? It's like, so much time is spent in developing these things. For free. Open source. Available to the world because people want to give. They want to help others. Doing what they were put on this earth to do and do it for something bigger than themselves. So they're working all day at a tech job and they go home on the weekends and they're like working on open source code to benefit the world. We're not scared of hard work. We're scared of hard work when we don't have a big